What's going on, everybody? This is my second semi-regular update about my 2023 contest prep, and we are here in the beautiful Mexico City. We just had an awesome time presenting for the IIAFF, that is an international institute of certifications for fitness instructors, specifically in the Latin American world. Actually, I should say the fully Spanish-speaking world, including Europe as well. And we had a great experience, so big shout out to them. But I think what we wanted to talk about today was where I'm at, what the more finalized game plan is for my contest prep, and then where Berto is going to slot in as my coach, as I need more and more help being objective, which is probably the truth for most competitors. So for those who weren't here the first time or who forgot, I've got a number of shows planned. And tentatively right now, I also have a powerlifting competition planned. So that powerlifting competition is North Island Championships. That is a mix between a regional and a national level competition in New Zealand. It's all of the North Island can compete there, and I want to do it because I can potentially set national records. And I will be an M1, Masters 1, 83 kilo lifter, and I've got a shot at potentially, depending on how well I do, maybe the squat, the bench, and the total, or at the very least just the bench. So I'm looking forward to that, and that has moved from June to early July, which might sound like a good thing. Wow, he doesn't have to cut as much water weight, but it actually means I have more time to lose strength and feel dieted. So that is still a tentative plan, because if I'm not squatting like at least like 200 kilos and benching 140 and deadlifting 240, then it'll just make me mad to put up numbers no matter what weight class I'm in, so I just won't do it. And that's just being honest. So I would like to still do that. And then I've got a fairly large gap until my first show, the last weekend in September, and that's the Aotearoa National Championships, New Zealand National Championships, it's the only WNBF New Zealand show. Great show, I judged it last year. And then October 7th, we're doing the Battle of the Bay. So shout out Francisco, shout out Frank. That's his show in the Bay Area he's promoting. And then the weekend after, Jeff and I are going to go up to Puget Sound, which is, I think, Arlington, Washington is the specific area, and we'll do the Pro-Am. Might both be doing the pros. I might be doing the amateur, and then 2 weeks after that, I'll be back home, and then I'll be going over just right across the Tasman and competing in Australia. I'll be in the WNBF Australia the last weekend in October, and then I've got 3 weeks until WNBF Worlds in Seattle. So it's a packed schedule, but I have these big long breaks. And I would say right now, I think I'm actually ahead of the game as far as leanness where I'm at now. It is April 18th, and I was 88 kilos before I went on this trip. And let's just say the steps have been many.
Yeah.
And I've noticed myself getting leaner just in the week or the 5 days that we've been here. So I would suspect that when I get home, I'm going to see a high 86 or a low 87 weigh-in. So I don't know, what do you think as far as my stage weight being around 80 kilos and me being 15 pounds over for the Americans at 5 months out?
Yeah, that's about right. You have nothing hanging off you. So that's what we wanted, was to get to this point where we met up for this trip where nothing, all the excess was just cut off. And it's very easy, it's very straightforward. And honestly, I think the next 5 pounds will be pretty much the same. And then, who knows, maybe a little diet break after those first 5. And then maybe breaking it up into thirds, right? And then next 5, and then another diet break. But, I think the main goal this go around is to just, and we did a good job with that, mess you up less and less every time. It's the one thing that, as you get older as a bodybuilder, you learn to become more efficient when it comes to everything, right? It's when you're younger, you take reps that you probably shouldn't have taken. It's like skull crushers and bent over rows. Younger guys do that with their prep, whereas in our case, it's okay, we have that gear, but what if we save that gear to get to new places? So I would really like for us, my goal is to get to the point where, hey, we have about 2-3 kilos to go and we're not chasing anything. We can sit on it for 2 months. Yep. That would be, more, or maybe similar ratios in regards to like low days where we're pushing and then days where we back off. And I guess the big thing is just keeping you chill and cool during, the next 5 pounds and as much of the next 5 pounds after that. And then just get into a situation where it's, for 2 months you're not chasing anything. You're just kind of letting it come to you, and some really extended diet breaks as well. Last time we saw a big decrease in the amount of lower body edema that you had, and I think a lot of that had to do with switching up cardio modalities, right?
Or the lack thereof.
Yeah, the lack thereof, right? And then also just you just get better at putting things in their own little like neat compartments. The longer you do this, right, it's just gonna suck. So
yeah. Also, not having leg days. So for those who don't know my extended contest history, we thought I was very, very lower body fat dominant because my quads would take forever to come in, and my glutes would come in before my quads.
Yeah.
But which is relatively rare in males, at least. But we don't actually think that's what's happening, because in 2019 my quads came in early. No, I mean, I'm still lower body fat dominant, but I'm a lower body fat dominant dude.
Yeah.
And my quads came in quite early, and then it was a matter of the glutes and hamstrings coming in more. I became a little more normal. And the big difference was I wasn't doing, 100 intervals a week like I was in 2009. I didn't lose my father and get injured and move and have the financial crisis while I was trying to work in the personal training industry. There was a lot going on in 2009.
Yeah.
In 2011, I think was honestly still the leftover fatigue from all of those things, minus maybe the injury in 2011. And I didn't even push to get incredibly lean because I lucked out. I had a good peak and I was lean enough, and I competed in a show where I ended up coming out on top. I got PNBA Pro qualified, and that was enough for me to cash out. Now that's because I was still so fatigued from 2009, which tells you where my headspace was at. But anyway, to kind of bring things back, I really like the idea of us taking a diet break when I'm around like 85 or something like that, if that's what we're looking at, because that'll probably happen right around when I'm planning on doing this powerlifting meet.
Yeah.
And I think it would be good to maybe have like a 1, maybe even 2 week diet break during.
I'd be with that. Yeah.
Yeah, during the taper, and then also the lead into that competition, and just make sure that I'm within striking distance to cut water, and do what I need to do. Mostly a gut cut for those who are interested. That's just basically reducing the energy density of my food, so that it's largely what's in my digestive tract that goes down for me to make weight, and hopefully not even have to do much of a water load situation. So anyway, that's great timing, and then I can put powerlifting on the shelf and do probably a more efficient and less stressful program for making sure I keep as much of my muscle mass as possible as I move into the dark stages, the digging for prep.
But I think the way we've been doing it right now, there's a target, to go get that target, and then we'll, based off how things are going, we'll decide when we have the formal weekly stuff. I mean, I think you can get like 3 or 4 off you easy, and it's a non-issue. And then just to get in the habit of routine, and having a coach and having to send something in every week is something that you do have to make like space for. So
not to say that there aren't benefits to it.
There are, but mental space, right? Because now you have someone there with you, and then just like actual like set of time to be consistent with that, right? So yeah, but the next 3 or 4, because this has worked really well. Like, even though I haven't seen him posing, it's like I can't help it. It's like I'm constantly scanning, and in many ways this is the tightest. Like you just have less things hanging off you at this body weight.
Yeah.
Like I can't say, okay, that grew without a doubt, but what I can say is that there's just less loose things hanging off you, right?
Yeah.
Everything is like tight and in its place. If you told the average person how much you have to lose, they'd be like, no way.
No way. You don't have that. You're already very, very lean. Yeah. So for reference, in 2019, I started my contest prep right around me, slightly heavier than this weight. I was on 89, 88. And I would like to believe it. I do believe it because I trust Berto's eye more than, honestly, anybody's in the bodybuilding business, that he thinks I essentially look tighter at the same weight. So I'll take it. Maybe it's all in my calves. We'll see.
He did have some veins that I've never seen before. So
there you go.
Yeah.
So So I think, one thing we were talking about I guess it was breakfast on Sunday, the last day or the day after, I can't remember. Anyway, we were having breakfast down here at the hotel, and we were talking about how Berto prepped his entire prep without actually officially tracking macros or calories. I'm sure you were attentive to it during peak week, and you were considering where you were at. And I sometimes in my head do go through like, okay, what are my calories at? And I can do that audit, and I know that I'm probably 90% accurate within 2 minutes of just thinking about what I did in the day. And we're like, well, so if you coach me, do you need to change that? And we were actually having a conversation for the first time of, I think we could keep that. And for reference, one of the things we do with our athletes in the off season, once they've established all these habits and they have a really good ability to kind of eyeball foods, and they understand the, I guess you could say, the construction of a bodybuilding lifestyle in terms of what meals look like and how to get to appropriate calories and macros for their goals and them individually, which does come from initially tracking for most people, is that we give them outcome goals rather than process. Because we go, okay, you as an athlete with the experience level you have the process. So what Berto was saying is, I might tell you, I want you to lose at this rate. I want you to have X number of days where you're eating at maintenance. I want you to situate them relevant to your different training sessions relative to what are your weak points, what flattens out the most. Having a high day or a higher calorie day the day before when you're training your muscle groups that are most important to your symmetry that we don't want to deflate. So there's still a lot to coach, but interestingly, it wouldn't potentially include, and here are your calories and here are your macros, but I want this rate of weight loss. And I think that's that's going to be, I think, the first time you ever coached anyone like that.
Yeah. It just sounds like a different language, like, right? What a trip. But, I mean, if you know what you're doing and you just really need guidance and that, like, these are the right decisions and you just need these boundaries, like, so you don't go too hard in this direction or in that direction. Geez, it's a huge advantage to have an athlete that at the ground level can scan what's going on. And I don't know, based off that, like maybe just randomly say today's not a day to diet. I am going to, pull it up to what is a maintenance because, just feel terrible, sleep's been lousy, training, third straight training session that sucks. Or sometimes it might be the other way around where it's like, oh, the coast is clear. Like, I don't know, maybe Barb went somewhere for a few days. You're like, that's exactly what I did a few times. It's like, oh, she's out visiting her family. I am going to literally just sit at my desk and run a very steep deficit.
Yeah.
You just become aware of like all the many moving parts that outside of just like, what is your maintenance? What is a reasonable deficit? Like, it's like, where you're at all times,
Yes.
And yeah, we're going to take advantage of that. And I prefer to run it that way until the end. We might not be able to, but I think we'll get really far.
Yeah, it's interesting. The reason I stopped not tracking in 2019 when I was maybe a month out from my first show was largely because I wanted my banky. Like, it wasn't because things weren't working. I wasn't losing at an appreciable rate. I wasn't maintaining strength, and I wasn't looking better. It was that I was like, I'm 4 weeks out. I'm not going to not track because, well, don't ask me why, but that sounds crazy, And I think it was helpful in so much as we did get some trial peak weeks to run.
Yeah.
We played around with, let's try kind of like an early backload and then just maintain it, and that seemed to work well. It made game day a little more straightforward. But to know where I needed to be at, we were tracking.
Yeah.
We might do that again, or we might just simply keep a meal structure and timing and fluid intake. That will probably require tracking if we want to kind of maintain or just maybe a urine clarity and frequency.
Yeah.
But if you notice what we're talking about, urine clarity, how clear your urine is, and frequency, again, that's an outcome, right? That's the consequence of your total hydration. And your meal structure, that's, that is a process thing. But a lot of this, the shift when you have an athlete who knows what they're doing, and you will do this a lot, like when we do our off-season coaching, it's not too different, is just shifting from telling them what to do to telling them what outcome to get to and trusting them they know what they need to do because you've built those tools into them. You've built their competence. You've supported their autonomy. And now they're in a position with this level of experience where they really need a good consultant and someone also like, I know for certain that there would be a point where I'm looking at my own my own videos, and I'm going, "That's good. I look great. Night, I'm getting sharper. That's what I want to see." And you're going to say, "You look like a skeleton. You are super flat. I know you're chasing these shreds, but we need to actually bring it up because I want you to look like a bodybuilder on stage." In my experience, that's something that even top-level pros do when they already do it intuitively. And it's because you're just so goal-oriented and focused on one aspect of prep. And on the other hand, some other bodybuilders, they feel like their strength is their size, and they're so unwilling to get flat that they slow themselves down too much, don't get lean enough, and they're trying to just barely be shredded but as big as possible. And then when they get on those lights, they find out they're not actually that shredded, and they could have looked much bigger 5 pounds lighter. So I think that's where, in my head, I'm really looking forward to getting your more objective feedback on my physique, because I think it is a little frustrating where when I get flat, it's super obvious in my upper body, but not so much in my lower body. But my lower body needs to come in more, and then I think I bounce around when I get stressed. Like, I'm not big enough to be competitive, so I need to hold on to all my muscle, but I also need to get shredded. So you can find yourself, especially when you're dumb and dieted and tired, rationalizing something that probably isn't the best choice. So I think the objectiveness of a coach, regardless of whether you're focusing on processes or outcome, is still where you're going to come in really valuably to me.
Yeah, because you're going to know what to aim for, and then you just do it. You've done it before, and I trust you that, okay, you know what it should feel like going from this weight to this weight, from this weight to that weight. When you're pulling too hard, when you're not pushing hard enough. And I think you'll be able to better protect yourself. And that's so important. Like, the more you can remain intact until you get to that point where it's like last round, that's how far we're gonna be able to go. It's like you have to protect yourself along the way, and no one can do that like you. You can make those calls like at 4 p.m. on like a random day. I'm not that good, bro. So yeah, that'll be interesting. To do it this way, and who knows? Maybe we do it until like it's November or something, and it's like let's not risk anything. Like, yeah. So yeah, a lot of new things, but I don't know. Like, there's many ways to. I mean, we do this because we love the challenge.
Yes.
And people it might seem like this is like, why take the risk? Why not just do it that way? But it's like, we're curious. We want to, like, bodybuilding is not just building muscle groups and like losing body fat, but it's like building the whole thing. Like,
Yes.
Growing as a person.
Fisicoculturismo.
Yeah.
It's a culture. There's growth to it, and most importantly, it's not going to be my last season.
No.
So the worst case scenario is we learn some things that worked poorly, and I don't do as well as 2019, but I have a lot to learn. I'm not going to be happy about that outcome, but I'm absolutely going to be better for it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right, a lot of new things, and I think before we wrap this up and we cut in with me mostly naked, which is what you're really here for, be honest. Talking about the one last new thing that I'm doing. I'm not sure when I'm going to release this video, but there are two reasons why I'm doing it. One is that I have become relatively convinced by the data on partial training at longer muscle lengths, and I've also been convinced by the experiences that I've seen of Alberto changing, especially your back, but I'd say your physique more broadly, and incorporating lengthened partials, as we like to call them, or various techniques that are designed to challenge your muscle groups that you're training for bodybuilding when you're at long muscle length. So anyway, I would say that the evidence is now relatively strong in favor of it. For those who are mass subscribers, if you're paying attention to the May issue, you'll notice that I did a research brief on the effect of static stretching, the most recent study on muscle growth. And I also did my review article, my long article, on the newest study by Cassiano and colleagues 2023 that looked at lengthened partials versus shortened partials versus full range of motion in the calves. And the group that did the lengthened partials actually had twice as much muscle growth in the calves as the group that did full range of motion. It's just one study, but it's not the only study. Yeah. So at this point, I would say, definitely check out the mass article if you're interested. If not, definitely check out, just the research, Cassiano et al. 2023. I'm sure it's being shared around, or if not, it will be by the time I release this video. and we had talked about it on a podcast recently, but all of my training that is not designed to assist my powerlifting right now is long muscle length partials. So you've probably seen that in the gym. I'm basically doing the first half to at most 2/3 of a movement that are in the lengthened position. And the only time that is not the case is when I'm doing bench, squat, deadlift, or movements that are intended to assist that performance, because guess what? Specificity is still a thing. And if you don't lock out your bench press, you don't get to get the rack command. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, I think that's pretty interesting, and that may mean that I can have a more potent stimulus to maintain my muscle mass.
Yes.
And maybe in these early stages, even put a little something on.
Yeah.
I'm optimistic. Maybe that's bullshit, but I'll take it.
Out of the question. I don't think it is. Yeah. If you have all your stuff in order, I've seen it.
All right. So we're going to leave it there, folks. A few seconds, you get to see me naked. I know you're excited. We'll see you in a second.
All right, folks, let's talk about it. One of my favorite things to do is to appraise art. In this case, bodybuilding art. That's what I am, I guess, formally and informally trained in doing. And thankfully, Eric is have at it. And I think this is in particular very freeing to me, because I've done a lot of Saturday Night Lights, but I always have to be careful with what I say. Whereas with Eric, it's like, hey, I want the smoke, because we can use this to formulate the best strategy possible to hopefully get the best outcomes we can this year, and the best outcome being a WNBF pro card. So I'm gonna assess the situation, what we are going to try to do, at least what I think we're going to try to do early on, and how we formulate a plan, how we organize ourselves to get the most out of what it is that we're working with. And again, I get to run my mouth, and this to me is, I just don't get to do it with other folks. A little backwards with Eric, in that the symmetry round is gonna be a place that we're just going to try to not lose ground. So he has a very pretty physique, but a big component of the symmetry round is that classic X frame. Thing with Eric, he has clavicles that are a little bit more narrow. We'll probably play with this pose. I have some ideas. Nevertheless, when it comes to this round, it's one of those things where it's like, let's survive it. Let's get into the muscularity round, because honestly, that is where he showcases the majority of his symmetry. It's going to be in the muscularity round, which is kind of backwards. But again, low-key, really, really good symmetry on him. It's just that these are a little bit too, I guess, exposing in ways that are not really catered to his physique strengths. And symmetry is one of those things where, I've said this before about my situation, that I think 1/3 of healthy young men out there can put on more muscle than me, and that's not what makes me a good bodybuilder. It's not the amount of muscle I carry. It's the fact that it's just a little bit more X-framey than people will think. So it's like, you can see a big old tree, but if a big old tree is kind of like, just things are out of proportion, and then you see a tree that's slightly smaller, but it kind of looks like that classic, say, oak tree silhouette, right? Something about that tree, even though it's smaller, looks more just wow, like art. So same thing with physiques. Symmetry is what we pose for. Symmetry, regardless if you're a mass monster or you are very symmetrical, that is the biggest key to finding success on the bodybuilding stage. And so much of symmetry is just, it's genetic, but these judges are human. You got to remember that you can do things if you know what they're looking for. All right. So the side poses, this is where you're like, okay, maybe there's a little something there. A little bit more X-framey here than you would see. He looks tall. He looks 6 feet tall on that front poses, on all front poses, outside of the most muscular. He just looks stretched out for a bodybuilder. But here you start to see a little something where you're like, oh, okay. especially once all the lines are in. That's the one thing about Eric. He does have, again, smaller bone structure, but his muscle bellies, especially a few small ones running across the sides, they're not as geometric as you would think. They're a little bit more bulbous than one would assume. All right. Okay, some new stuff on the lats there, I think, especially once we get rid of that back fat. There's much more there than one would assume. Okay, I think there's components about each side. The first twist and then the second twist when it comes to the side relax is like things that I like. But again, he's not rusty when it comes to his posing. That kind of surprised me. But still, it'll get better and we'll be able to like kind of adjust things to better suit his physique as time goes on. So here's where you're like, okay, you kind of discount him a little bit during the symmetry round, and then this pose comes in and you're like, oh, little Greek statue sort of vibe to him. All right. Tall biceps, that's the one thing he's always had with those front poses. And again, like this is where the quads really start to come in. Considering how small his knee joints are, those quads are pretty good. And over the years, number of reasons why, he's just holding less body fat in his lower extremities. One for sure was the fact that just cardio inflames the shit out of him. But also progress, but also just like more time being a dude, right? As you get older, those body fat storage patterns tend to switch up a little bit. All right, this one here, it's like, okay, he looks tall, and then you can really see the fact that the clavicles are a little narrow, kind of like me based off where his lats attach. Whenever, you know, the front poses, they just kind of like stretch out to the point where, yeah, they look less round, they look more geometric, more straight. I think we play with a leg kick here. We'll see, because with him, again, we're not out there trying to KO people. We're trying to finesse things. Like that is going to be the way we conduct our business. We are going to finesse things. We are going to look like art. And of course, this will help once we're shredded and he gets all those like classic lines, especially the ones he has across his torso. That will really come in handy. So that's how we got to take care of stuff. We got to play to our strengths. All right, and this is where the side poses on Eric, holy crap, you are going to see that he's just a different bodybuilder, especially in the muscularity round. So again, symmetry to some extent, I guess, you know, the symmetry round is a symmetry round, but it's just what these poses classically expose the most symmetry. However, they're still judging. They're still looking for X-frames. And like on the side poses, it's where he looks really X-framey. You combine that with all the lines that I'm telling you about, and we got some good stuff going. So here's where you're like, oh, I didn't see that coming. This is where he actually looks like a near heavyweight competitor per bodybuilding classes. There we go. Very classic here. Classic in, like when it comes to the lines, not classic NPC classic. Just, I guess it's kind of the same thing, right? So yeah. All his side poses right here, they really draw your eyes back to him. He looks big. He looks pretty. And they really fit his structure quite well. Because again, the clavicle width is hidden, right? You see only what's sticking out. Okay, I think this pose will really come alive once we get rid of some of the lower back fat. There is some there. Nevertheless, hamstrings are on. That's always been a strong point on him. But this next pose is where, yes, in this pose too, but this next pose is it's where, okay, you're going to see that he's not super wide. However, especially like his whole torso has a bunch of really unique lines. Again, lines that you would not expect from someone with a skeletal structure that is as small as his is relative to his height. So this pose will be on when we're PO'd. Okay, here we go. Next one, the sides. Oh, we skipped those. All right, we only did one side. You're just gonna have to take my word on that one. I'm actually surprised he was able to get all these. It's been a while since he competed, but he's just really good at knowing where his body is in space. But yeah, those two sides, it really, whatever sort of gap they built on him during the symmetry round, like you start to look at him again, and then he hits this pose. And this pose, again, because of the torso, because my man's got underrated symmetry. Like, that's the thing. There's a lot of guys out there that are like Eric Helms, as a bodybuilder. No, he's got a pretty physique, and I'm not just saying that because he's my boy. He legit does. It's a very nice skeletal structure. Again, clavicle's a little narrow, but the whole thing like grew up to be a pretty tree. So this pose right here is money. Ab thigh. Just such a clean pose. And it'll get better as all the details come in. Okay, this pose, we might have to finesse a little bit more. Most musculars are usually kind of like a knockout. You know, people think they're worth more than they are. Nevertheless, it's a great final statement when things are close. We might have to finesse this one a little bit more because that's our strong. That's how we win the game with him. Okay, here comes the most muscular crab. We actually did some things moments after to try to protract things a little bit more. And the reason for that is because, hey, there's so much meat back here that you can like straight like roll forward if you know how. And hey, clavicles we can't do nothing about, but we can maybe roll some meat forward. And we'll see how that works. It was the trial version, beta testing. We'll see if it sticks around, especially things when it gets leaner, you know, you have to tweak posing. And since it has been some time since he competed, some things that we might assume look a certain way might look different, hopefully better. So we'll see, but clean pose still. Clean pose. This is one where he packs a little bit more punch than you would think. So yeah, that's where we're at. That's what we're working with. Again, the strategy with Eric is going to be primarily let's finesse this thing. Let's play to our strengths, and hopefully get leaner than he's ever gotten last time. He did some pretty whacked out things. It was elite conditioning, 100%. But as much as judges say, it's like, yeah, it's not a conditioning game. Like, when you see it up there, like, again, these judges are human. When someone is just a step leaner than everyone, like, you just can't help but go back and look at that person, even on the poses that are not their strong poses. So yeah, that's where we're at. That's the strategy. That's what we're working with. And yeah, we got some work to do. But it's going to be a good time. I look forward to it. And yeah, we're going to try to get the most out of my bro's outfit.